All right, let's just jump right in. We are going to unpack what might be one of the most famously difficult and maybe most misunderstood verses in the entire Bible. You know the one. It's a command from Jesus that has caused, well, centuries of anxiety. But what if it's not actually impossible? What if we've been reading it all wrong?
So let's start with the command itself. Because let's be honest, for a lot of people who try to follow Jesus, this verse, it doesn't feel very inspiring. It feels more like being set up to fail right from the get-go.
Yeah, for so many people, reading this is like hitting a brick wall. You just feel this immediate wave of inadequacy, right? Even hopelessness. I mean, if this is the standard, how is anyone supposed to measure up?
And there it is. In our modern world, especially in the West, we hear that word perfect, and our brains immediately jump to one thing: flawless, sinless, not a single mistake. And that, well, that just feels completely and totally out of reach. But here's the thing. The key to unlocking this whole verse is realizing that Jesus isn't just dropping some brand new impossible command out of nowhere. No, he's actually reinterpreting something really, really old. And by doing that, he's showing us what God's heart is truly like.
Okay, so to really get this one command, we kind of have to zoom out a bit. We need to look at the pattern, the teaching method Jesus is using here. He's not just throwing out random rules. He's building a very specific argument, piece by piece. You'll notice he uses this specific formula over and over. Now, he's not trying to get rid of the old law. In fact, he says he came to fulfill it. What he's doing is peeling back the layers. He's showing his followers what that law was always pointing towards. He's getting right to the heart of the matter.
Take this, for example. He takes the external act of murder, something everybody agrees is wrong, obviously, and he traces it back to its source. He says, look, the real issue starts way before the act itself. It starts with that anger just simmering in your heart.
And then he does the exact same thing with adultery. Once again, he shifts the focus. It's not just about the outward physical act anymore. It's about the inward desire. He's moving the goalposts from what people can see on the outside to what's really happening on the inside in the heart.
So, what's the big takeaway here? The crucial point is that Jesus is calling for a completely different kind of righteousness. This isn't about just being better at following the rules externally. No, this is about a righteousness that starts from the inside out. It starts in the heart.
Okay, now to really get what Jesus is doing here, we need to understand a little analogy. It's something his audience would have instantly understood. It comes from the Jewish teachers of his day, and it has to do with a fence.
So the rabbis would talk about putting a fence around the Torah, and the whole idea was to create extra rules, little guidelines, to keep people a safe distance from actually breaking one of God's big commands. It's kind of like a preventative measure, But here's where Jesus does something totally radical. The religious leaders of the day, they built their fences around external behaviors, stuff you could see and measure. But Jesus, he moves the fence. He builds it around the heart. Why? Because he knows that's where sin actually begins. All right, so with all that context, we can finally circle back to that so-called impossible command to be perfect. Because as it turns out, the solution has been right there the whole time. It's just been a little hidden in translation. See, our English word perfect carries so much baggage. It has all these ideas attached to it that just weren't there in the original language. And understanding the original Hebrew concept that Jesus is pulling from, well, it completely unlocks the meaning of this entire passage.
The Hebrew word is tamim. And get this, it doesn't really mean flawless or without a single mistake. It's more about being whole, complete, finished, or mature. So try to think of it less like a standard of flawlessness and more like a goal of maturity. And this isn't some new idea that Jesus just made up on the spot. Not at all. The Old Testament, in books like Deuteronomy, repeatedly calls God's people to be tamim, to be wholehearted and complete in their devotion to him. So Jesus is just drawing on this really deep, established biblical theme. Okay, so if being perfect actually means being complete or mature, what does that look like in real life? Well, Jesus gives us the ultimate example right before he drops that big line on us. The final contrast he makes, well, it's the climax of his entire argument. He's moved from anger and lust to what he presents as the ultimate test of a mature heart, loving your enemies. And who does Jesus point to as the perfect model of this completeness? The Father. And why? Because God's love isn't picky. It's not selective.
He gives good gifts, like sun and rain, to everyone, whether they love him or hate him. His love is whole. It doesn't play favorites.
So here's the logic, all laid out for us. Being tamim, being perfect like the Father, isn't about having a flawless track record. It's about developing a mature, complete love. A love that's so whole, so all-encompassing, that it extends even to your enemies. That is the true test.
And just like that, the entire perspective shifts, doesn't it? This command was never meant to be a source of anxiety. It wasn't supposed to be this impossible standard of sinless perfection. Instead, it's an invitation. It's a challenge to grow up, to mature into a radical, all-encompassing love that really reflects the heart of God.
So this just reframes the whole question, you know? It turns an impossible abstract standard into a really profound and deeply personal challenge. The question is no longer, how can I be flawless? The real question becomes, how can I grow to love completely, starting with the very people I find it hardest to love?